Welcome back to the Green Evangelist channel. It's another beautiful day here in Kiambu in central Kenya, just on the outskirts of Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. And I always feel so blessed, so privileged to call this home. Today I came out to the tea side. I came out to the part of Kiambu that's not very far from Kiambu town, that's not very far from where I live, but in this part of the country called Limuru, Tigoni, Shianda. In this area they grow a lot of tea, so you see the rolling hills of tea. I think when I started the Green Evangelist journey earlier at the beginning of this month, I was in a similar place. And I like coming back to this place because it reminds me just how beautiful our land is. So Kenya is beautiful, Kiambu is beautiful, and home is beautiful. It feels so peaceful to be here. I can hear the chirping of birds, I can hear the wind, and then there's a little stream behind me, so I can hear the water flow. And I can also hear some sheep. I think it's the only sign of human activity that I've come across on this stretch, besides the tea. So I think it's so important that we are present and get to appreciate where we live. We get to appreciate our planet. Wherever you live, that you feel like there's so much beauty, there's so much natural beauty. And so I hope wherever you are, you get to be grateful for that. But coming back to the Green Evangelist journey, so last week I talked about plastic waste, specifically talked about how I had gone to the market and had bought some produce. I came home with the produce and I started going through the produce and realizing just how much of the plastic produce nets I brought home. Had like a bunch. If you haven't seen that video, please go back and check it out. I think it's last week's video. I'll put a link below. But the reason why that is important is because we are living in a crisis. We as a population here on planet Earth, and specifically people in Africa. Africa is rapidly urbanizing. So where I live in Kiambu, we are seeing an expansion of Kiambu town. We are seeing an expansion of many small towns. We're having all these urban settlements that are mushrooming, that are growing, and the intensity of urbanization is everywhere. And so our environment is also changing with that. And with that, we are seeing that we are facing a plastic pollution crisis. We are putting so much plastic into our environment that this plastic is ending up in our waterways. It's ending up in our soil. We have a crisis, a health crisis with microplastics. Microplastics are very tiny particles of plastic that we cannot see. And microplastics come from plastic pollution. They come from everyday plastics that are dumped out in the environment. Some of it comes from tires on vehicles, but we are facing a crisis where microplastics are everywhere. And so last week we talked about the plastic produce nets, and we know that the plastic produce nets are widely used in Kenya. They are widely used in Kiambu. If you go to the market and you're doing produce shopping, if you go to the supermarket and you're doing produce shopping, chances are they'll put your produce in a plastic produce net. And most of us don't think about it. You know, we gladly take that and we go home, we unpack the produce, and you know, we just toss the produce net, the plastic produce net into our bin or into our trash. The challenge is those plastic produce nets are very difficult to get rid of. They're not very easy to recycle, and there isn't like a big recycle infrastructure around them at the moment. So as I've been walking around and realizing that we have waste, we have trash in so many places, we can tell the government is struggling to clean up all the waste that we are generating in our neighborhoods, because we still have a lot of informal settlements. We have a government that has limited capacity. So when you go around, you see quite a bit of trash. And if you look closely at that trash, one of the things that you'll see most commonly are those plastic produce nets. And so they end up in our environment, they end up in our soil. Sometimes we are burning them and creating smoke that is filled with pollutants. And it's ending up in our air in the form of microplastics. So the plastic produce nets are a big contributor to this microplastics crisis that's affecting the health of our environment and also affecting our health. And so I came out of that visit to the market. When I got home, I just reflected on what that journey is of being a normal day citizen who goes out to the market, to the supermarket to buy produce, and what it would mean if we thought about the impact of those produce nets, what impact using those plastic produce nets as much as we do has on the environment. And clearly, I think we have a role to play, and I hope anybody watching this would agree that we have power. We have the ability to say we can do something about the use of these plastic produce nets. So I'm on a journey myself to try and use them less. When I go to the market, when I go to the supermarket, I'll carry my durable, reusable bag that I prefer my produce to be put in, so that I'm not bringing all these plastic produce nets home. And that's well and good, but there's a bigger issue going on here. There's a bigger issue going on here in that when you think about those plastic produce nets, and when you think about the journey that Kenya is on, in 2017, Kenya banned plastic bags, the kind of plastic bags we used to put our shopping in whenever you go to the supermarket. So we banned those. So you don't see as much of that anymore, which is a good thing. And I think it was a very, very bold step. But we're still struggling with the plastic pollution crisis. So there's still this bigger issue to say that if so many of us are using these plastic produce nets, some of us will heed the call. We'll hear that these plastic produce nets are harming our environment and our health, and some of us will change. But I'm not sure it's going to be enough of us or a significant number of us. And so something has to be done that's more than just asking people to be mindful of how they use or how their produce is packed, and to reduce the use of the plastic produce nets. I think that can be a part of the solution, but it cannot be the only way we get out of the crisis that we are in. And so in the last week, I've been privileged to explore this topic of plastic pollution. And I also had the opportunity to attend a conference earlier in the week, a conference organized by the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, an organization called KEPRO. And KEPRO is part of what they call the Extended Producer Responsibility Mandate in Kenya. Turns out that there is this regulation. I wasn't very familiar with it. I've had to learn a lot about it in the last couple of weeks. But Extended Producer Responsibility is a policy instrument. It's an approach that governments use to try and manage plastic pollution. And the concept behind that is that when all this plastic is ending up in our environment, and it could be plastics, it could be batteries, it could be electronic waste, it could be all manner of waste. It's there because somebody produced it, somebody sold it as a product, or it was maybe used to package a product that was sold, and then it ended up in the environment. So the extended producer responsibility concept says, let's hold the companies that brought this plastic into being because they either imported it from out of the country or they manufactured it. And let's hold them accountable for making sure that once the product is used, it doesn't end up in our environment. We get it out of the environment. We can recycle it or we can get rid of it. But let's not have it pollute our environment. And there's a cost to that. And so governments are trying to get the producers of these plastic products take responsibility for the cleanup. So it's worked in many other countries, of course, in the West. It's a very established policy instrument, very established programs in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. But in Africa, it's a new concept, and Kenya is ahead of many African countries in that we passed an extended producer responsibility law in 2024, last year in November. And so that was a product of discussion over a period of time. I think it was about maybe 3-4 years before that law was actually passed. There was a lot of engagement, and one of the ways in which producers of plastic and the companies that produce plastic were engaging when it comes to conversations about this mandate of extended producer responsibility is through KEPRO, the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization. It's an industry-led organization. It brings together the producers of packaging. They focus specifically on packaging, all manner of packaging, from paper to plastic. So they are looking at post-consumer waste, and their mandate is to try and organize the producers of this plastic so that they can participate in the extended producer responsibility mandate that the government is setting out as a regulation. So I attended a conference 2 days ago organized by KEPRO, and it was an interesting conference. I got to hear a lot about what KEPRO is doing and hear different perspectives about sustainability, about circularity, which is this idea of making sure that things don't end up in the environment, that we recycle plastic. And it was quite encouraging. I think it was quite encouraging to see that so many people are pumped up. They are interested in this idea of sustainability. But it was also concerning because I also learned that even though the EPR regulation in Kenya was passed, the National Environment Management Agency, NEMA, is supposed to be rolling out and overseeing the implementation of the EPR program in Kenya. But that's not happening at the moment because there's a court case. The companies, some of the companies that produce plastic waste and other forms of waste that would be affected by the EPR regulation went to court through their lobby groups, through their associations, and they've sued the government, saying that the regulation was rushed, it imposes very high cost of compliance, and that I think they'd like to be given more time and more consultation to see how they can abide with this specific regulation. So the court decided to suspend implementation or enforcement of the EPR regulation. So right now it's on pause. So the KEPRO conference talked about sustainability, talked about EPR, but there is no really legal mandate for the companies right now, because until that court case is decided, NEMA cannot enforce the law. They cannot go to every producer and say, you're supposed to be doing something to clean up the plastic waste that is ending up in our environment because of your business. So that was a bit discouraging. But I think it's so important that as citizens, we learn about these things because, as I said, we can do our individual part to try and keep our environment clean. But the problem is bigger than that. One, because there's millions of Kenyans, and it's going to be really difficult to rely on everybody abiding, cleaning up, being very responsible in managing their waste. Something has to be done at a higher level. So this is where the government comes in, and the government is a protector. This is why we elect leaders, so that they can protect our interests as a nation. They can protect our individual and collective interests. And one of those interests is the right to have a healthy environment and to be healthy ourselves. And so the government, in rolling out the extended producer responsibility regulation, intended to do that. They intend to help us protect our environment and our health. And so I think more of us need to know about what the government is doing. In that conference, it also turned out that the government is really struggling. The head of enforcement of NEMA was at this meeting, and he admitted that it's a struggle for the government because they've devolved waste management from the national government to counties. But counties are really struggling. They haven't set up collection facilities where they can collect and recycle waste. It's an ongoing effort. It's an ongoing effort from various stakeholders, from the government, from the national government, the county governments, private sector associations, and the networks through which they operate. And then, of course, for us as citizens, I think it's our responsibility to be informed about what the obligation of government or the obligation of private sector is when it comes to helping us keep our environment clean. And so I think most of us may not be familiar with this regulation, the extended producer responsibility regulation. We should look it up. We should try to learn about it. We should be keeping a close watch on how this court case plays out, because we want the EPR mandate, that regulation. We want it to be implemented because we want help. We want companies to contribute money so that the money can be used to fund cleanup. The money can be used to fund recycle programs. We also want the money to be used to design better packaging that has less of an impact on the environment. We also want the money to be used to create awareness about reducing how much plastic we use, whether it's plastic packaging or other forms of packaging. And so I think for me, the call for our people here in Kiambu, the call for anyone watching this in Africa, you know where that's where my heart is to continue contributing to the conversation and the growth of Africa towns, Africa cities, the growth of our people in a healthy way, in a manner that helps us thrive. We want to be in environments where we are healthy. We want to be in environments where there is not a lot of pollution. And so we have a challenge with managing waste, and specifically plastic waste. We have a problem with microplastics, and we all will have to pitch in. We'll all have to do our part. So I think my call this week is to pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention to what regulations are being passed at the national level, at the local level. Pay attention to what companies are doing, because my experience is that companies will do what companies should do, which is look out for the interest of their shareholders. So they will try to maximize returns, maximize profits for the sake of their shareholders. That's what companies should do. And sometimes that goes in conflict with having to spend more money to keep our environment clean, protect our environment. So it's not natural for every business to want to do that. If they are not regulated, if they are not mandated, many businesses will focus on making money. And I think this is where we really need to pay attention to ask ourselves, how are we holding companies accountable? We look at the brands that we consume and ask ourselves, how are they packing those products? And what program is there to ensure that the packaging, the plastic packaging that comes with those products does not end up in our environment? I think we start to expect more even of our supermarkets, because our supermarkets are the avenues, they are the channels through which a lot of these products end up in our hands. And then from our hands, then of course we have to get rid of the packaging, the plastic packaging. And so yeah, if we have more recycling facilities, if we have more formalized and organized collection services, it's going to serve us all. So pay attention. pay attention to what's going on in this space. Let's all do our individual part, but also let's pay attention to what's going on in the policy environment. Let's pay attention so that we can have informed dialogue with our political representatives, with our members of parliament, with our senators, with our MCA, and ask them, how can you help us ensure that we are winning this fight against plastic pollution? So that's the message for this week. Look forward to continuing this conversation in the coming weeks. And if you have any comment and any question, or anything that you'd like me to talk more about in this green evangelist journey, I'm really looking forward to making this a conversation. We're still early in this journey. We are looking at how the environment, especially how the environment is changing with rapid urbanization and how that's affecting the lives of people. That's why we're here. That's the conversation that we are having here. And we are really, really rooting for sustainable urbanization in Africa, here in Kenya, and also in Kiambu County. So if you have an opinion, if you have a question, if you have a suggestion about this topic, I would gladly engage with you. So I look forward to hearing your comments. I look forward to continuing this conversation, and let's work together to green Africa's urban future.